I always thought that money solves everything, that if you have enough to buy whatever you want, life automatically gets better. But I was wrong. My lottery win destroyed my family, and now I'm not sure if it can be fixed. My name is Daniel. I'm 32 years old. I live in the suburbs of London, in a small townhouse with a plot of land that I could barely afford on my boring job at an insurance company. My life has always been monotonous. Work from morning to evening, then household chores, a bit of chatting with my parents and brother, sometimes with my sister. Everything seemed fine, but deep down I felt that family is something fragile, something held together by unspoken words and petty grievances. My parents, Susan and Robert, have always been good people, but they never knew how to manage money. Debts on the old house, car loans, medical bills, all of it hung over us like a dark cloud that we were used to ignoring. My brother Marcus is ambitious but envious. He always tried to be better than me and my sister. Claire, my younger sister, was always getting into trouble with relationships and jobs, and I often felt like I was the only one keeping the family in check. Ordinary days passed gray and predictably. Sometimes we laughed at dinner, sometimes argued over trifles, but no one thought life could suddenly turn upside down. Until it happened. It happened on the very day I bought a lottery ticket just for fun. I never really believed I'd win, but fate loves jokes. I remember the moment I checked the results. My heart was pounding like crazy, my fingers trembling, and the phone screen glowed with red numbers that flipped my life. 50 million euros. I won. I, an ordinary guy from suburban London, became a multimillionaire overnight. At first it was euphoric. I couldn't believe my eyes. I called my parents brother, sister. Everyone was happy, shouting, laughing, making plans for how we'd spend the money. I remember Claire almost crying with joy and Marcus trying to hide his envy behind a wide smile. We all sat at one table, raising toasts to new life, to unchanging family. But happiness turned out to be deceptive. Barely a few days passed before I started noticing the first cracks. My parents began subtly hinting that they needed my help with debts. "Daniel, you understand, we really need support," my mother said, and I nodded, thinking I could help without harming anyone. Marcus suddenly started talking about fair distribution, claiming that as a brother he had a right to part of the winnings. Claire, inspired by dreams of an easy life, quit her job, counting on my generosity. And I, naive and foolish, thought I could control the situation. I bought a new house, a car, even a dream vacation in Malta, believing everything would be fine, that money wouldn't change us. But family isn't just laughter and toasts. Family is hidden desires, envy, fears, ambitions, and all of it started coming out. I remember one evening sitting in the new house, looking at the city through the windows and realizing that something was changing. I had become not a person, but an ATM for those I loved. And the more I tried to keep the peace, the more it crumbled around me. I didn't know that things would get worse ahead, and that my loved ones, those I considered my support, would turn into people ready to betray me for money. And that was just the beginning of the end. Life before the win was so gray that sometimes it seemed like everything around was shrouded in a veil of fog. I woke up every day at 6 in the morning to make it to work, and returned home only in the evening, tired and irritated. My job at the insurance company was boring and monotonous. We sold policies to people, discussed percentages, risks, deadlines. Everything was predictable like clockwork, and honestly, I hated it, but I stayed because I knew. Stability is a kind of security too. The house we lived in was a modest townhouse in the suburbs of London. Nothing special. 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, a garden with haphazardly trimmed bushes. I shared the house with my parents and sister Claire. Brother Marcus had moved out long ago but showed up regularly, especially when money was involved. My parents, Susan and Robert, were always kind but a bit absent-minded. Mom worked as a teacher at the local school, Dad as an accountant at a small firm. Both loved us, but they were financially vulnerable. Debts and loans followed them like a shadow, and it passed on to us. Constant anxiety, arguments over bills, petty nitpicking. Marcus was the living embodiment of ambition and envy. He always wanted to be better than me, and he almost always succeeded. I never understood why he was like that, but I internally resigned myself. Claire, my younger sister, was completely different. She was romantic but irresponsible. Her relationships almost always ended in disaster and her jobs in chaos. I often thought she was born for drama, not real life. And in this boring world of everyday life, full of bills and small quarrels, I tried to find meaning. I played football with friends on weekends, read books, sometimes went to parties, but all of it seemed like temporary salvation. I knew my life wasn't a tragedy, but it was hard to call it happiness. The first signs of hidden cracks showed up in little things. Mom sometimes complained that money was slipping away too fast. Dad quietly grumbled about loans, and Marcus, when he showed up, said with a barely noticeable smile, "You've always managed, right? But what if you really get lucky?" And I didn't understand what he was getting at. Claire was always asking to borrow money until I get a new job. We had Sunday dinners, a kind of ritual. It seemed like everything was going fine, but conversations inevitably slid into comparing successes with each other. "Why doesn't your job bring in as much money as mine?" Marcus would ask, sometimes mockingly, sometimes complaining. "You just need to work harder," Mom would reply, and Dad would quietly nod. I tried to keep the peace. I bought small gifts, helped with bill payments, sometimes gave Claire a little money for temporary needs. All to remain the family's support so no one felt deprived. But even then I felt an anxious whisper. Money can change everything, even if it's not there yet. And then, on an ordinary day that was no different from all the others, I stopped by a small store on the corner to buy coffee and a lottery ticket. I bought the ticket more as a joke, thinking, well, maybe I'll get lucky for once in my life. I didn't even imagine that in a few days, this ticket would flip my life and my family's life forever. That evening I was sitting on the couch, watching a series and eating pizza when I casually checked the results on my phone. At first I thought my eyes were deceiving me. The numbers on the screen flashed and I repeated them out loud as if trying to convince myself. No, no, this can't be true. And when I realized I'd won 50 million euros, everything inside me flipped. The joy was indescribable, my heart pounding as if it wanted to jump out of my chest. I called my parents, brother and sister, and heard the same delight in their voices. We gathered together, discussed plans, dreamed of travels, houses, cars. It seemed like happiness had finally knocked on our door. But happiness was deceptive. Barely a few days passed before I noticed the first signs that money could destroy everything I valued. Parents started subtly hinting that debts needed to be paid off. Marcus talked about fair share, and Claire was already planning how to spend my wealth. I was naive and thought I could control everything, that love and family bonds could overcome greed. And back then, I still didn't understand that this was just the beginning. I remember that day as if it happened yesterday. I held in my hands a small piece of paper that had seemed like just another ticket bought for fun. I stood in the kitchen, my phone shaking in my hands, and when I saw the result, my heart literally jumped out of my chest. 50 million euros. At first I thought it was a mistake. I checked the numbers several times, called the lottery company to confirm it was real. When they did, I felt an incredible mix of emotions: joy, shock, disbelief, fear. I wanted to shout, laugh, cry, all at once. I called my parents first. Their reaction was like in the movies. Mom screamed, Dad barely held back tears, and then both hugged me at the same time. My words, "we won," sounded silly because it felt like it wasn't just we anymore, but a whole universe of possibilities. Marcus, my brother, couldn't believe his luck. His voice trembled when he said, "God, Daniel, this is incredible. We should celebrate properly." Claire immediately started making plans for how everything will be different now. The next day we had a small family dinner. Parents set the table with their simple dishes, but the atmosphere was festive. We drank champagne, which, honestly, I bought for the first time in my life, not for £5, laughed, made plans. I saw pride and hope in their eyes, and it was wonderful. We discussed travels around the world, buying a new house, dream cars, investments. It seemed like everything was possible. Even Marcus, usually so critical, was full of enthusiasm. Claire was already calculating which stores she wanted to visit and jokingly hinted that now her life would be like in the movies. But as I quickly realized, the euphoria was deceptive. Even at this early stage, the first signs appeared that money could change everything. Mom quietly said we should pay off the family's debts, a hint that sounded like a light shadow on our celebration. Marcus started discussing fair distribution, as if the money was already his, and Claire proudly declared she could now quit her job and dedicate herself to her interests. I tried to ignore the warning signs, thinking that love and family ties would withstand the test of money. We laughed, made plans for the future, took photos. I bought the first small gift. Marcus got new headphones, Claire a designer bag. Parents smiled silently, accepting small gifts, but something flickered in their eyes that I couldn't see then. Expectation. Over the next weeks, the world around me began to change. People I'd known all my life started treating me differently. Friends, who used to be content with a simple cup of coffee together, began asking to help a little. Distant relatives, whom I saw once every 5 years, called with the most incredible stories of need and hardship. At work, changes happened too. Colleagues started hinting that you shouldn't forget about friends, and management, learning about the win, looked at me with barely hidden interest. Everything became strange. People I considered friends suddenly saw me not as a person, but as a wallet. And all this was just the beginning. I felt that the huge sum of money opened the door to a world where family ties and friendship could become mere tools for achieving other people's goals. But back then, in the first days after the win, I still didn't understand how much it would change my life. I bought small joys for myself: a new car, a modern phone, a cozy corner in the house that I'd always wanted. All of it seemed innocent, but even these purchases became symbols of the familiar world gradually dissolving. The first alarm bell rang when Dad, usually calm and reasonable, hinted that maybe it's worth investing a bit and helping the family with debts. Mom said something like, "We've always known you'd get lucky one day, but now we all need to think about the future." Their words sounded caring, but I felt pressure. Marcus started coming more often. His conversations gradually turned from joyful discussions of plans into quiet demands. "You know, we're family, Daniel. You should think about us too." Claire, meanwhile, rejoiced in the freedom the money gave her, and that joy gradually became an expectation that now I'd provide for her dreams. And so, amid the joy and laughter, amid toasts and promises, I first understood: winning the lottery isn't just happiness. It's a new responsibility. And responsibility, as it turned out, can destroy everything that was dear, even family. Several weeks passed after the day I learned I'd won €50 million. The world around me changed, though outwardly everything remained the same. It seemed like I still lived in my cozy house in the suburbs of Edinburgh, went to work, chatted with friends, but relationships with my family began to take on strange shades. The first signal of alarm was the parents' conversations. Mom, quietly winking at me during breakfast, said, "Daniel, we've thought. Maybe it's worth helping a bit with our debts. You understand what problems we've had." I felt a slight burning in my chest. It wasn't an open conflict, but a hint of expectations that would soon become demanding. Dad added more directly, "You're a secure person now, son. Family is a team, and you should take care of all of us." At that moment, I still tried to smile and assure myself that everything was under control, but somewhere deep inside, anxiety crept in. I understood that the money, which seemed like a solution to all problems, had already begun to influence how people around me perceived me. Marcus, my brother, started coming almost every day. At first, he just wanted to chat, share news from work and joke, but over time, his visits turned into quiet discussions of how to properly distribute the winnings. I listened to him and tried to stay patient, explaining that everything needed to be thought out and weighed, but he became more insistent. Claire, my younger sister, showed particular enthusiasm. She quit her job, claiming she could now follow her dream. At first, I supported her decision. It seemed like new opportunities. But soon it became clear that she saw me as a source of funding for all her plans, trips, courses, new hobbies. Friends started changing too. Some, whom I considered close, began asking to help a little. At first, these were small amounts I could easily lend, thinking it wouldn't hurt. But every time I gave money, new requests appeared on the horizon, and soon it became impossible to separate genuine friendly requests from greedy demands. The key moment came when distant relatives started showing up, ones I'd seen only at weddings and anniversaries. No one knew about my win, but now everyone was in the know. Their stories of hardships, illnesses, and failures started sounding like a mantra. Every visit turned into a list of demands I was supposed to fulfill. I tried to maintain balance. I bought a dream house, a car, helped the family with debts, but all of it seemed like a drop in the ocean. Loved ones stopped seeing me as a son and brother. They saw a bank, a wallet, a source of solutions to their problems. At first, I tried to defend myself, explain boundaries, but every word met resistance and dissatisfaction. Quarrels began arising between the relatives themselves. Marcus and Claire started arguing about fair distribution. Parents couldn't take a neutral position, always trying to support one side. The atmosphere at home became tense. Every conversation about money was a new battle. Even holidays stopped being joyful. Outwardly, I tried to maintain the appearance of normalcy. I smiled, joked, told friends everything's under control, but inside me grew a sense that the world around was collapsing. My own dreams and goals took a back seat because now every person in my circle saw only an opportunity to get their share. It was especially hard to see how Claire, my sister, was changing. Before, she was ambitious but not demanding. Now she was convinced that the money was her right. Her smile was more often forced, and conversations, covertly manipulative. Marcus became more aggressive and insistent. Parents, who used to be support, now rather observed and quietly pushed for compromises that benefited them. One evening, I sat alone in the living room, holding a glass of wine, and realized that my life no longer belonged to me. I was surrounded by people I loved, but the love seemed conditional. It depended on money, not real feelings. And that's when I first asked myself, was it worth it? Was all this really happiness? This moment became a turning point. I began to realize that winning the lottery isn't just joy and opportunities. It's a test of relationships, a check of who's with you and who's for your money. And the scariest part, that the test was only beginning. Soon after, the first open conflicts appeared. Marcus started directly declaring that he deserves his share, and Claire began throwing scenes over every gift or small purchase. Parents tried to stay out of it, but their quiet look spoke of supporting one side. I felt like I was losing control. What seemed like a blessing became a source of fear and distrust, and I understood that the real problem wasn't the amount of money, but how it changes people. Even the closest can become strangers when millions are involved. Several months passed after the lottery win changed my life. At first, I still tried to control the situation, helped parents, gave Marcus a small sum for a start, supported Claire in her plans. But soon it became clear that any help was just the beginning of an avalanche. The first real test was friends. Some, seemingly the closest, started asking to borrow a bit of money for big purchases, cars, travels, even business projects that never brought income. I tried to explain that you can't give too much at once, that you need to think about the future, but every refusal was met with dissatisfaction. "You won millions, Daniel. It's not even your money," I heard from some. And that was the most painful. I saw how my friendship turned into a bank transaction. Meanwhile, family quarrels became more open. Marcus started showing up regularly with demands for fair share, sometimes in harsh tones. "You think you can keep it all to yourself? We're your family." His confidence was frightening. Claire, in turn, started openly manipulating parents' emotions, complaining about injustice and claiming I should provide for her dreams. Parents tried to stay neutral, but their looks and comments clearly showed whose side they were on. Mom often said, "You understand, son, we can't just sit idly by," and Dad quietly added, "Marcus has a right to a part. It's family." Every word of theirs pushed toward conflict, and I felt the situation slipping out of control. And then came the day when everything changed. At a family dinner, Marcus openly declared for the first time, "You're treating us like idiots. We deserve our share, and if you don't give it, I'll get it through court." The words hit me like thunder from a clear sky. I tried to stay calm, explain that money shouldn't destroy the family, that we need to agree peacefully. But his anger was unyielding. Claire, not wanting to stay out, added, "And I want my share too. You think you can decide everything for us." Parents were silent, their looks tense, and I felt the tension in the room growing. This was the first time I understood. The lottery win turned my family into an arena of struggle for money. But the real drama was just beginning. Soon, distant relatives appeared, ones I hadn't seen for a long time, uncles, aunts, cousins. They came with stories of suffering, illnesses, and financial hardships, hoping for my help. Every visit turned into new stress. I had to politely listen, smile, while in my head spun one thing: where's the end to this? Friends didn't lag behind either. I faced requests that were impossible to ignore without offense. Loans for business, medical expenses, trips. I tried to give advice, but any refusal was seen as betrayal. Internally, I started feeling isolated. Money became a barrier between me and the rest of the world, and any attempt to get closer turned into an argument or hidden manipulation. The climax of tension came on one rainy evening. Marcus came to my house, his face red with anger. He shouted, accused me of greed, said I was using the family for my own gain. Claire chimed in, "And I can't take it anymore either. You've ruined our lives." Parents, who had tried to stay calm before, sided with the kids, quietly pushing for a compromise that benefited them. I was left alone, surrounded by people I loved but no longer recognized. Words from friends and relatives turned into blows. Every request sounded like an accusation, every smile like a hidden attempt to get something. I understood that the money, which seemed like a blessing, had turned into a curse. That evening, sitting alone in the living room, I first realized the lottery win not only gave me freedom but also took away the main thing: trust, respect, and harmony in the family. I looked at photos of our joint holidays, at the laughter and joy that now seemed long forgotten, and felt emptiness. And then came the thought that still haunts me. Maybe the real win in life isn't money, but the ability to preserve yourself and relationships with loved ones. And I've lost both. From that moment, I understood that more trials lay ahead. Conflicts were only gaining momentum, and I was forced to find a way to save what could still be saved, and at the same time protect myself from the destructive consequences of wealth. The moment I'd feared from the beginning arrived, when my money became the cause of open war in the family. I'd always thought I could control the situation, but now it was clear. All attempts to keep peace had failed. That day Marcus came to my house without warning. His face was red with anger, eyes burning, voice trembling with rage. "You think you can keep it all to yourself, Daniel?" he shouted. I tried to calm him, talk about reasonable boundaries, but the words didn't reach him. There was no respect in his tone anymore, only demand. "Give me what's fair." Claire joined him, her voice no less sharp. "You've ruined my life. I wanted to work, build a career, but you thought you could pay for everything for me." Parents, who had tried to maintain neutrality before, now quietly encouraged them, winking as if giving permission. I felt the world around me collapsing. Everyone I loved had become strangers, obsessed only with one thing: money. Inside me, anger and despair battled. I didn't want to quarrel, but their accusations were so unfair and sharp that holding back was impossible. Marcus, not holding back emotions, lunged at me. At first it was words, but then he grabbed my shoulder, pushed. At that moment I understood. This wasn't just an argument, it was war. I tried to push him away, hold the situation, but the force of emotions was stronger than reason. Claire screamed, parents yelled, neighbors peeked out windows. The scene turned into chaos. Distant relatives, whom I tried to ignore, suddenly appeared in the house, as if sensing the smell of conflict. Their voices mixed with my family's shouts, everyone trying to prove they were right, that they deserved part of the win. My friends, who once seemed reliable, also showed up with demands, accusing me of greed. I felt like I was losing control. Everything I'd built was dissolving before my eyes. My life turned into an arena of struggle where there are no winners, only victims. I understood that the money, which seemed like a blessing, had turned into a destructive force. The situation escalated to court. Claire filed a lawsuit demanding fair share. Marcus, under pressure from parents, also prepared for legal proceedings. I hired lawyers, tried to find a compromise, but their demands were impossible to meet. The court became a public spectacle where my family portrayed me as the enemy, and I as the source of all troubles. Every hearing was torture. I saw how parents condemned me, how brother and sister used every opportunity to show I was unfair. Rumors of our conflict spread through the town. Friends started avoiding me, and new acquaintances I'd made after the wind disappeared. I was left alone, though I had everything: millions, house, cars. But inside was emptiness. Money didn't give happiness, didn't give support, didn't give real relationships. They turned my life into a trap where I was both king and prisoner. In this struggle, I first thought about what I really wanted. Not money, not status, not relatives' approval. I understood that true value is respect, trust, and the ability to be yourself. And if that's impossible with the people I loved, then I need to seek it elsewhere. This moment became a turning point. I decided, I can't continue living like this. The money that destroyed my family shouldn't destroy me too. I started planning steps that would help preserve the remnants of sanity, and allow me to restore something valuable. The culmination of this story isn't just in quarrels and courts, but in the fact that I first saw a path out of the labyrinth of destructive relationships built by money. Inside me, an understanding was born. Sometimes you need to lose people to find yourself. After all these months of chaos, courts, and quarrels, I felt drained. My sense of loneliness became almost physical. Millions of euros couldn't fill the void inside. I woke up amid the luxurious walls of my new house and realized, there's no family here, no friends, no one who genuinely rejoiced for me. I was like in a golden cage, surrounded by wealth that had turned into a prison. One morning, sitting on the terrace with a cup of coffee, I realized, this can't go on. Money shouldn't define my life. Everything I'd tried to preserve, family, relationships, was destroyed. But I could still control what to do next. I decided, if wealth brings destruction, let it bring good to others. I started researching charitable organizations that really help people. I found funds for supporting the homeless, hospitals for children with rare diseases, initiatives for nature restoration. I understood that by giving away part of the winnings, I'd not only help those in need but also feel control over my life and restore inner peace. My parents, brother, and sister received notifications of my decision. I wasn't going to argue or discuss details. I just sent letters with amounts they'd never see. Inside me was a strange relief. No one was happy with my decision, and that was wonderful. For the first time, I felt freedom from others' expectations. Several months passed. My life changed radically. I started participating in charitable projects personally, visited shelters, met people whom my money helped. Their sincere smiles and gratitude were something I hadn't felt in a long time. There was no lies, pretense, or hidden gain here, only real emotions. And on one such day, at a homeless shelter, I met a man named Thomas. He had lost his job and home, but hadn't lost his dignity and hope. We talked for a long time, and I understood that it's exactly these meetings that make my life full. Money stopped being a goal. They became a tool that connects people. Over time, I began restoring relationships with those who genuinely valued me, not for my fortune. Old friends who didn't ask for money and supported me in tough moments started reappearing in my life. I learned to trust and open up again, but on my own terms. I also realized that my family, destroyed by greed and envy, could no longer be part of my life. I let go of grudges and disappointments, but keeping them close was impossible. It was hard but liberating. For the first time, I understood that sometimes losing loved ones is a chance to find real people who will be there not because of money, but because of heart. My days became filled with real meaning. Meetings with people I can help, projects that make life better, travels, new acquaintances. Money no longer defined my decisions. I chose what was important to me, not to others' expectations. And so, sitting on the terrace where I once felt lonely and lost, I understood one simple thing. The lottery win destroyed my family but gave me the opportunity to find myself. Maybe I lost blood relatives, but I gained people I can really trust. The last thought that came to me every evening before sleep. I lost my family, but maybe for the first time, I found myself. And that feeling was worth more than any millions.